Hello everyone, and welcome to Kareniya's Room. Well, the year 2023 is officially in the books, and we're moving on to yet another year of good times, hopefully, and good anime. Also hopefully. This past year has been one of experimentation for me, as I've started making anime content mostly this year, including unscripted and scripted videos for seasonal anime and my top lists. I've always sort of had a bad history with trying to make consistent content, and that's sort of the reason I never really had a schedule. At most, I try to put something out within a month or two, and I hope you guys do enjoy what comes out. With that being said, however, today we'll be heading back into the realm of scripted content, as I will be delving back through the year of anime in 2023, and giving you my top 3 best and worst shows. Surely you could tell this by the title or thumbnail. We've had a lot of great fun this past year with some absolute bangers of anime, a lot of trash, and honestly a lot more in between. It really has been at times a lot of amazing shows in one season, spring specifically comes to mind, to maybe a handful each, and that's okay. Even if you disagree on certain shows, there will always be something to look forward to every season. With that out of the way, I won't waste much more of your time, and instead, we're going to jump into our list. Be warned though, there will be spoilers in this video, obviously. However, I will start with a couple honorable mentions. These were shows that either didn't quite make the cut, or as of the writing of this script, are still airing, and as such are not completed yet. This is obviously not going to include everything, as I haven't seen everything this past year, including many sequels, but of the list that I have seen, these are what I would like to highlight. And we're going to be breaking it down by season. For winter 2023, the beginning of the year, I would like to highlight at least a couple that didn't make the list. We have specifically The Vampire Dies in No Time Season 2, a great comedy gag manga that I really fell in love with over the past year, about a vampire hunter and a vampire who are teaming together to solve mysteries and all sorts of goofy antics. And Onimai, or I'm Now Your Sister, which is the story of a boy who is turned into a girl by his scientist sister and essentially has to live their life the way of a woman. It sounds strange, but it was really popular anime at the time, and honestly it's pretty good, so I would recommend it. For spring, we have My Clueless First Friend, a very simple, cute romance story about two young children who are kind of understanding themselves and who are definitely a bit polar opposites with each other. I won't say too much about it, but it is very cute, and I recommend you at least give it a watch if you love, romance. For summer, I'm not going to give you too much details because there's a lot of shows I'd like to highlight. So we have My Happy Marriage, a kind of supernatural romance story. We have Horimiya The Missing Pieces, which is a continuation of Horimiya, but it's mostly just side stories that never got adapted. Undead Murder Farce, which is a bunch of immortal undead and various other types of creatures who are going around Europe and solving mysteries. Rurouni Kenshin, I think, doesn't really need much introduction, but it is a simple story about a former samurai who is trying to live a normal life, and all the people of his past are coming back to haunt him and want to fight him and kill him, and it is actually pretty good. We have Helk, the story of a human hero who wants to destroy humanity for reasons which are evidently pretty obvious as you see what goes on in the anime, which is that humans are actually pretty despicable in their attempts to try and defeat the demon race, and specifically to Helk, if you can tell. Then we have Temple, which is a simple, ecchi comedy romance story of a man who is living in a temple to pay back the debt that his father had accrued over this place. It's very kind of funny, honestly, and it's pretty raunchy, so if this is the kind of thing you're into, give that a look. And finally, for summer, we have Level 1 Demon Lord and One Room Hero, one of the shows that I fell in love with that season, because it was so fun. It's the story of a former hero who is now kind of living a very slovenly and recluse life, who's getting pulled out of this life by the former demon lord who he killed. Very interesting stuff. And finally, for fall, I'd like to highlight a couple ones that were obviously in my tier list. So we have the 100 Girlfriends Who Really, 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 Really Love You. Great fun about a boy who is going to have 100 girlfriends. Ron Kamonehashi's Forbidden Deductions, which is a story of two detectives going around solving mysteries. One of them being kind of an apprentice to this other guy named Rankamono, who is a very brilliant detective, but he has this weird kind of gift that also tries to get the people who are guilty to kill themselves. Very interesting stuff. We have Migi and Dolly, a story about two identical twins named Migi and Dolly, who are living a kind of different, weird life now that the death of their mother has kind of forced them to be orphans, and they're taken into this really weird village, which is the place where their mother died, and all sorts of mysteries are going on in there. I won't say too much about it because I think that one's a good one to kind of dive into yourself. I definitely recommend that. And finally, the Yuzuki Family's Four Sons. Yuzuki Family's Four Sons is just a very wholesome show about a man and his three brothers living their life after the death of their parents, and we see all the growing pains of growing up and having family and brothers, and I could not recommend that enough. With these out of the way though, and it's already 6 minutes into the recording, let's finally get into the top shows of 2023. Number 3, The Dangers in My Heart. Now this one pains me so much to have to put here, but I have to put it here because there is some other stuff here that is fantastic. Animated by Studio Shine Animation, who is the same studio behind stuff like Takagi-san. You've heard me talk to death about this show, but I will talk again, damn it. This is a story based around Kyotaro Ichikawa, a sort of gloomy-looking boy who has a deep fascination with the macabre, like skulls and killers and whatnot. And the polar opposite to him is Anna Yamada, the tall, goofy actress model in his class, who is part of an infatuation with Kyotaro, in the sense that he wants to kill her and see her suffer. Edgy stuff, right? Bruh! Well, this sort of mentality kind of drops quickly as the two begin hanging out after a chance encounter in the library, in which Kyotaro helps Anna not to be discovered snacking in the library, as things tend to go. Seriously though, this girl has an appetite that would make Tarare proud. If you don't know who Tarare is, you can look him up. It's not really a great story, but he is a man with a ferocious appetite. They form a budding connection to one another, talking in class, walking home from school, and even being together on class trips. Over this time, the two start recognizing feelings for one another. While it's mostly Ichikawa who's recognizing it pretty early, Yamada is gonna start getting to understand these feelings as well. And while we haven't seen much in the anime, as a manga reader, I can at least say that the needle is moving. By how much, I'm not sure, but it is moving. This series, as I mentioned before, kind of came out of nowhere for me. The concept sounded ridiculous, but I naturally gave it a shot as I'm a big fan of romance, and I fell in love, dude. Our main leads have great bouncing chemistry with each other, with Yamada especially being my favorite in the entire cast. Hell, I've made a whole copy pasta video about her. If Anna only has one fan, that is me. Our side characters are interesting too. We have the diminutive Chihiro Kobayashi, and she sort of serves as the straight man to Anna's funny man, or Tsukomi and Boke if you prefer your Japanese examples. There's the cheerful but ever-conscious Honokahara, and she is very conscious about her weight, which doesn't really seem to bother a certain other person if we're being honest with it. Even Kyotaro's sister Kana is a real treat, and a true shipper on deck for her brother and Anna. Though excluding Kenta Kanzaki, a boy who has a caring heart and a love for big girls like Hara, the boy I mentioned earlier, and the girl I mentioned earlier. A lot of the male cast didn't really do it for me too much, if I'm going to be honest with you. There's one glaring exception, but we haven't met him just yet, which is Anna's dad. But we will be meeting him in Season 2, so fantastic. If you've read the manga, you know that Anna Yamada's dad is actually pretty cool. Otherwise, the show, it looks really pretty. I really love the work from our VAs for Kyotaro and Anna, being Shun Hori and Hina Yomiya especially. Both of them have been part of other favorite shows of mine this year, especially Shun Hori, who's playing Ichikawa, because he was also Migi in Migi and Dolly, and I think he did a fantastic performance in that. As to the same studio behind Takagi-san, like I mentioned earlier, I kind of expected them to adapt something good in the realm of romance, because that one worked. And once again, they sure did. As of the writing of the script, I said I'm eagerly awaiting Season 2, but as of the recording of this video, it's already out, and it is lovely. I'm so happy the show's back. Number 2, Oshinoko. Dogakobo really came out swinging with this one. If you know Doga Kobo, a lot of the stuff they animate tends to be more slice of life comedy, kind of stuff like this, like Maru, Gabriel Dropout, New Game, and then some other stuff, in between, like Diary of Our Days at the Breakwater, Engaged to the Unidentified, just kind of stuff that's like not really super grounded, dramatic, serious. So when I heard their name on this, I initially wasn't sure what to think, because while author Aka Akasaka, the familiar mangaka who wrote great comedy with Kaguya-sama, this seemed a bit more serious. I still gave it a watch, and honestly, I don't regret that. The story centers around the events of one person specifically. Obviously, it'll branch out, but it centers initially around one person, the main star, Ai Hoshino. She's a young idol and is pretty well known across Japan for being part of B Komachi, a group that basically her charisma and stage presence brought great notoriety. She becomes a mother at 16, becoming pregnant and having to hide this knowledge naturally due to the toxic nature of the idol industry regarding their idols. And I guess generally because it looks bad for a teenager to get pregnant, even in this world. Caring for her is Goro Amemiya, who, along with another patient in the hospital named Serena, are actually big fans of Ai and B Komachi. Serena tragically dies young, never really being able to fulfill her dreams as she was stricken with cancer as a child, and Goro is actually killed by a stalker who was looking for Ai and trying to protect her from this guy. Despite this, the pregnancy is successful and Ai gives birth to twins. But through a twist of fate, her twins are reincarnations of Goro and Serena. Named Aquamarine and Ruby respectively, we see the two growing up as children of Ai and living a pretty fun life despite having to be kept a secret from. Because naturally, how you can explain to the idol industry, oh look, I have two twins now. Tragically though, one day while answering the door for someone ringing her door, Ai is stabbed to death, which her horrified children have to look on and see. More specifically, Aquamarine has to see this. From the funeral onward, Aquamarine has sworn to find revenge on the man who killed his mom, and Ruby begins her life chasing the stardom that her mother once coveted. The first episode of this anime is basically much of the plot I just covered, jam-packed into a 90-minute runtime. Visually, Oshinoko is just absolutely beautiful. A lot of great use of color and very well animated because I have good faith in Doga Kobo, and they make absolutely great looking shows at times. The first episode was an absolute emotional roller coaster, and Ai's death was a complete gut punch. Not the death itself, but the aftermath of it, especially, was the worst. Like, that was a hard watch, man. And while I felt the next two episodes in the series were not as keeping up to the same pace that episode 1 had, by the time we start moving forward in the show, we start picking up steam again once we meet some of our other side characters. Specifically for me, we have Memcho, who is kind of a famous influencer girl who wanted her little bit of stardom, but was a bit too old to get that, which they say that she's too old. She's 25. I'm 28. How do you think I feel when you say that? And Akane Kurokawa, a reserved girl with a great acting talent. And we also have Kana Arima, who we meet pretty early in the show, who is a former child actress who's kind of learning to live her life after young fame and age, as naturally a lot of child stars do have. We run into a lot of themes about the entertainment industry, some of its glitz and a lot of its horrible and toxic effects. Aka Akasaka really went into, as it's often been described, a very decent amount of work to make the story accurate and kind of expose a lot of what's naturally going on in the Japanese entertainment industry. Which, I mean, if you know anything about Harvey Weinstein and all this kind of stuff, it can also apply to even the Western film and entertainment industry, naturally so. Besides Ai's story, naturally, which is the one we first see, Akane's is one that particularly hit a lot of people, as it was a pretty close parallel to the circumstances surrounding the death of Japanese wrestler Hana Kimura back in 2020. While on a reality show, an incident between her and another co-star leads to Akane injuring the other co-star. Because the director left it into the episode, fans got very angry at Akane and started ruthlessly bullying and harassing her, to the point of no return. Akane attempts suicide, but fortunately she was saved in the nick of time by Aqua. Sadly, the same could not be said for Hana Kimura, and a lot of the parallels in this episode definitely got the manga and even recently with the anime in a lot of controversy, because I heard that that particular arc was airing around the time Hana took her life, which very, very unfortunate timing on that part. Regardless though, I will say Oshi no Ko was an absolutely fantastic anime. Great music, utterly great art, and that first episode, if you're going to watch anything, please just watch episode 1 and at least give it some thought, because that was an absolute wonderful episode to watch this season, and this year actually. Plus, season 2 was announced some months ago, so keep an eye out for that. Huh? And finally, number 1, Vinland Saga Season 2. Vinland Saga returns after a few years of absence and, in my opinion, delivered the best viewing experience of the entire year. With Studio Mappa at the helm of Season 2, it was hard to know if they would keep the same spirit of Season 1. I think they were pretty darn successful though in this endeavor, especially considering the shift in tone that this season would kind of take compared to the first. So after the events of Season 1, Thorfinn is sold as a slave to a Danish farmer named Ketil and begins his time adjusting to his new life. This is where the farmland arc gets its name, you see. Joining him in this time is Einar, a captive slave from England ripped away from the life he knew and the people he once loved. The two couldn't be more different in demeanor, with Thorfinn carrying himself more reserved and isolated, tormented by his past as a killer and warrior, and Einar's more open but also hot-headed attitude that kind of brings the two into conflict at times. Though the two build a bond over the course of the season and become compatriots in their own right. We also see Canute in his evolution as king, firmly exercising his power and even having the king of Denmark, his brother, killed so he can overtake the throne there. I think Canute for me was a shining star this season. I found him very interesting to watch, which is also helped by the fact I find the real Canute interesting. We also have characters like the aforementioned Ketil, a Danish farmhand, his father and his sons, and a slave girl named Arnade who becomes sort of an infatuation with Einar. But we have a lot of other characters too, and, they're all great in their own right. This season mostly serves as character building and covert politicking more so than what we saw in Season 1, which had a bit more action happening, especially early on, like a lot more fighting going on, traveling, seeing everything that's going on. We spent a lot of time in Denmark with Thorfinn and Einar, learning about them, their feelings about being enslaved in the farm, and about Thorfinn's lofty goals about a world without violence and war, which he still recalls Vinland as the spiritual haven free of conflict. While we know in reality that's not exactly true, because naturally every place has ever existed has had war and conflict, it serves as a thread for Thorfinn to kind of imagine a world where no more blood was pointlessly shed, and coming from a former warrior with many kills to his name, it's a world he desperately wants. We see the souls of those he's killed that really haunt him and cause him sleepless nights, which is a bit of a common thread in a lot of the Viking warriors. Even the spirit of Canute's dead father, the former king Svein Forkbeard, loves to prod Canute and taunt him from death. Though I'm not saying that Canute killed Sweyn, we know in the anime it was Askeladd. A lot of people really wrote off this season because it wasn't going to be the action-packed, bloodthirsty show that the first season was, that was produced by Studio Wit. And I really feel disappointed in that. While we do get our fair share of fights in this season, some of the best involving Snake or Thorgil, it's mostly the one-sided fight, if you can call it that, between Thorfinn and a tough warrior that he takes on, in which he willingly takes 100 blows to get a meeting with Canute, who at the time is seeking to invade Ketil's farm to take it over. This is the episode, by the way, where that famous "I have no enemies" quote comes from, just so you know. The whole season was kind of a roller coaster of emotions. Moments of talking is like a lot of stuff we get here. We tell stories of the past, we get our many fights and invasions, and we even have a couple scenes that really just warm your heart, man. Like really touching death scenes. Honestly, I didn't think Vinland Saga would make me cry, but it did.
彼らにお世話になった者たちに別れを伝えてくるといい。ここで子供たちと待っているよ。
そうね。
So I gotta give it to the crew over at Mappa for creating such a beautiful animated sequence, and of course also to the mangaka for making that a reality. With all that being said, I couldn't give the number one spot to anything else. It's a visual spectacle, an absolutely fantastic story, and I think the building to something great. I pray to God that we get a season 3. I really hope we do. If not, I have the manga to look forward to, but I would love a season 3, please. Moving on from the best of the year, now we're going to take a detour and cover the 3 worst shows I had this year. I will level with you and say that it was hard putting together a top 3 because a ton of fantastic shows came out this year, but not many that I actually finished that I considered to be pure garbage. With that being said, however, I was able to at least finish a bottom 3. 2 of them were very easy to choose, but I did struggle with a third, so let me run at least through a quick dishonorable mentions first. This is mostly stuff that I didn't like, but also either didn't finish, or didn't really feel like it fit on the list of the worst. So first, I would like to mention Bofuri Season 2. I had a lot of fun with Bofuri. I thought it was a great, fun series, but I will say Season 2 was a bit of a disappointment, at least up till the end of the season, which then it actually started getting interesting, but most of the show was kinda dull. It really wasn't all that interesting. Taking it for the boring, definitely would be Reign of the Seven Spellblades. I gave this maybe 3 episodes, and I didn't fall in love with any characters, and I don't think I really care all that much about wizarding, which is kind of what this show is about. I know there's a similar show, but different in context, called Mashal, and I know that that's also kind of about magic, but also not quite, as it's more comedy-based. I haven't seen that one yet, but I'm definitely going to check that out at some point. We have Atelier Ryza, which started off actually kind of decent, but quickly fell into disappointment, and nothing really captivated me about the show. Like, the art itself is okay. Liden Films doesn't really tend to miss in terms of art for whatever I can see. The voice acting was fine, and it gives you pretty decent eye candy at times, with Ryza specifically, but I just didn't really fall in love with the story, so I kind of dropped it after about episode 9. And finally, Stardust Telepath. This is one that really looked cute to me, really looked like it'd be a nice, wholesome, fun show, but I only really gave this 2 or 3 episodes before I just kind of dropped it. I get the whole love of wanting to go to space and seeing aliens and all sorts of things like that, but it didn't really capture me, so that's why it's here. It's nothing terrible, but it's just, it belongs kind of in the mediocre category for me. But with that all out of the way, let's get on with the list now of the 3 worst of 2023, in my opinion, by the way. Number 3, Liar Liar. This is the show I settled on for my 3rd worst, mostly because it's the one that I sat through and finished, and that's really it. Produced by Studio Geek Toys, this is a strategy game anime which I don't have a ton to say about because either I'm just really dumb or the plot was really hard to understand. Could be both. It basically centers around Hiroto Shinohara, who transfers to a school that does battle games, and on his first match he challenges and beats the head of the island's granddaughter, which is a girl named Sarasa Sayonji, and he basically has to lie about how he obtained his coveted 7-star rank. You know, because the show's called Liar Liar, get it? Get it? Over the rather goofily named Empress, as opposed to being some nobody. Because stars determine your prowess, he has to pretend he's some sort of powerful newcomer, but a lot of the time, or most, it results in him cheating in various games to get an advantage over truly higher leveled students. Other than that, I don't have much to say about it. It got a 4 from me mostly because I didn't really connect with anything. The art is fine, but it's nothing special, and I feel having the main cast cheating a lot of the time doesn't make for great TV, especially in a battle game anime. Granted, I always knew this was going to be a thing where the good guy triumphs over evil, but how am I supposed to root for a cheater? I don't know, man. Let's move on to something else which I have more to talk about, which is... Number 2, My Life as Inukai-san's Dog. Now, hear me out. This could have easily been my number 1. It really easily could have. But it just manages to avoid the spot narrowly. Very narrowly. This is a show that's animated by Studio Quad, a studio which I had no introduction with before this show, and judging by their catalog is nothing that was going to even excite me to begin with. This adapts a pretty wild web manga, of which I'm not going to read, of the same name, because when I run you down about the show, you'll probably want to avoid it too, if you don't know anything about it. We follow the story of a nameless boy who one day awakens to find himself in the body of a dog. Sitting on the street on a cold, rainy day, a passerby happens upon him and takes him back to her house. However, the person who takes in this dog is none other than Kareniya Inukai, a schoolmate of the boy/dog who was also a bit of a school crush for this nameless boy. Given the name of Pochita, which admittedly got a chuckle out of me since this aired only a week or so after Chainsaw Man ended, they begin a life of living with Inukai-san and being the dog she oh so desires. I use the term desire not for no reason, because some of the content in the show is hard to describe in any other way. Joined with a cast of Mike Nekotani, a friend of Karen's who, despite her fear of dogs, makes a hell of an impression on Pochita, and Usagi Tsukishiro, a girl who, despite her teasings, actually had feelings for our protagonist in his human form. The three-girl ensemble with their dog really go through 12 episodes and an OVA of bizarre and downright horrendous scenarios, which, unfortunately for this review, I'll have to describe a little bit. This manga, and later this anime in particular, got a lot of noticeable controversy and ridicule online due to the series' content, which a good chunk of it is in a POV format of Pochita getting up close and personal with the three main girls, from many instances of simple, suggestive angles, which
don't let your kids watch it!
to scenes of Pochita either going underneath the girls' skirts, into their shirts, invading private areas, which I will just leave to your imagination, and all the while the girls, Inukai especially, are basically on the verge of almost orgasmic ecstasy. Hell, Inukai at one point is even dressed in cat lingerie and crawling around on all fours to have fun with Pochita. You don't do something like that if you're well adjusted, that's for sure. With all that being said, it at least got minor marks for generally looking alright. I didn't really notice anything that looked off or any weird proportionality unlike our number one show, and excluding all the weird dog stuff, which is going to be very hard to do, the ecchi moments with the human characters are serviceable if you're into that kind of thing. Regardless, should you watch the show again? No! I can't stop you at the end of the day, but once again, there is way better and less, shall we say, nasty kind of ecchi anime that came out this year. If that's what you want, give these shows on the screen a chance instead. At least they don't have, never mind, let's move on. And finally, number one, in my opinion, couldn't go to anything else but A Girl and Her Guard Dog. Now, admittedly, there's a bit of recency bias here, all things considered, but I sat through all 13 episodes of this show, and time again, it made me feel a wide variety of emotions. At times I felt it was fine, but nothing special. Then I'd be bewildered at what came next, which can be a fun experience at times, but it needs to have a good story behind it. This is not one of those stories. Animated by Studio Project Number 9, this story follows Isaku Sanagaki, a girl who's orphaned at a young age and is taken in by her grandfather, who's in the Yakuza. Being a busy man, Isaku is entrusted to a younger man named Keiya Uto, who is sort of a father/big brother figure to Isaku. She plays with him, even draws him for a class project, and generally loves being around Keiya. However, as the two age and Isaku is beginning to enter high school, she wishes to have a normal high school experience. Keiya kinda makes this impossible by bribing the school to let him pretend to be a student to keep an eye on Isaku, as his overprotectiveness only stays as strong as it was when she was a child. Despite her protests, Isaku relents and the two experience high school life together. Now, as you've heard me read this description, you might wonder a few things about some key details. Let me explain a bit for you, because now we're getting into the reason why this is number one on the list. As I've made clear, Keiya and Isaku are basically in a father, daughter, or big brother, older sister kind of role, something like that. This meaning that the 15-year-old Isaku is being shadowed and protected by the 26-year-old Keiya, who bribed his way into becoming accepted as a student, and now is spending a lot of time with a bunch of young high school students. Weird enough, but it only gets worse when you read the tags for this show and realize that romance is in there. Yes, Isaku and Keiya, though to varying ways of showing it, have romantic feelings for each other. I don't tend to harp on age gaps because most of the time people blow it up to be something that it isn't. However, it's hard to ignore this mid-20s man showing romantic feelings not only for a teenager, but a teenager he basically raised from when she was a child, at least around 5 or 6 years old. Granted, Isaku also holds romantic feelings for Keiya too, but Keiya, in definitely most sane people's eyes, would be the problem here. Keiya especially says and does some pretty creepy things throughout the show. There's one line in episode 5 that particularly made me shudder. Keiya, Isaku, and some classmates had went on a beach trip together earlier in the episode, only to be disrupted by a bizarre kidnapping attempt at Isaku, which, admittedly, this happens a fair few times in the show to build some tension, which doesn't exist, naturally. This kind of led to the party coming to an end, though. Isaku had been seen covering up her swimsuit, though, that she had been wearing, and her wearing the swimsuit again in the backyard of a makeshift pool party for the two that was set up set up as a reward if Keiya's school grades had improved. As he succeeds, naturally she grants them this reward, and the two have a bit of a fun pool party in the back. The two end up in a small pool together as well, which is definitely very interesting. And getting a look at Isaku's swimsuit-clad body, Keiya remarks something along the lines of,
"俺好みの体つきだなって意味です."
It's a rare feeling when I have to take a stand and process what I just heard. Remember, he raised her from when she was a young child. I wanted to just turn the monitor off and walk away when I heard that so much. It was horrible. Beyond this, Isaku is generally thrown around as a bit of a damsel in distress when the show wants to add some tension, who hardly tries to act on herself and save her own skin. One particular example that infuriates me, specifically with this, revolves around episode 9, where Isaku's taken hostage by a sort of love rival to Keiya named Mikio Tanuki, who is another related person in the Yakuza. He's been trying to get with Isaku, or at least trying to get her to ignore Keiya to get more with him, at least over these past couple episodes during the Romeo and Juliet play arc, or mini arc if you prefer. But this time around, he basically takes her hostage, at knife point, brings her to some abandoned warehouse with a knife still out, tears her shirt open, not all of it mind you, she doesn't show any bare skin, but she tears her shirt open and threatens to molest her right in front of Keiya. Despite Keiya coming to the rescue, naturally, bafflingly, Tanuki just walks away from this unharmed almost. And Isaku totally ignores this whole thing ever happened by the next episode. And I gotta wonder, how in the almighty fucking world do you get kidnapped by some weirdo who holds you at knife point, threatening you with sexual assault, and by the next day you shrug it off and continue to associate with this guy as if it was a minor incident? I get that he's also Yakuza, but surely Keiya would have done at least more than he did, considering how much he loves Isaku. I would have punched this guy in the fucking head 3 times or more, at least. Break a nose or two. Are you kidding me? But beyond the basic plot points, the only real winning points for this show for me is in the ED. That's it. I like the ending song and the video accompanying it. It is actually kind of nice. Everything else though, awful. Really bad. Horribly questionable plot combined with lackluster dialogue, which is very boring, very mediocre. Very forgettable side characters who serve almost no purpose to the show other than maybe to show that Isaku has friends. Which, okay. Not to mention, Project Number 9 basically either having little to no budget or little to no shits to give about this anime. Because the animation consistency and quality is through the floor. Looking through any discussion threads, I'm sure you can come across many examples of characters, especially Isaku, being very off-model and weirdly proportioned. You can find low-quality shots throughout various scenes in the anime, animation errors all over the place, like in the previously mentioned episode 5, there's a scene where Keiya's mouth is basically going through Isaku's arm. It's blatant, bro. There's little care with animation errors, little care in syncing basic lift movement, and this. Take a look at this. What is this? What the fuck is this? This was the funniest scene for me of all. It looked so bad. With all this being said, this should hopefully clue you in as to why I really hate the show and placed it number 1. Liar Liar just managed to be a lame and boring battle game anime. Inukai's dog at least had a decent budget and didn't look artistically bad despite the nasty dog play stuff. But this overall is just an utter dumpster fire that I couldn't stop watching. 2023 really ended on a hell of a note, eh? Anyway though, I would like to thank you for watching this video. We ran through a rather long video here about some of the absolute gems of this year, and also some of its shocking lows. 2024 is upon us, and as of the writing of this script, we already have some wonderful shows on the pipeline. However, that also means along the way we're going to be bumping into a few unpolished turds, and I hope you will join me this year on this journey through the world of anime. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and please tell me some shows that you either liked or hated, and I would be happy to read all you have to say. My name is Kareniya, and don't forget, you are always welcome in Kareniya's room. Happy New Year!